Hi, my name is Greg Canty, and I'd like to welcome you to the Win Happy podcast. I love chatting to people from all walks of life about their lives and their careers, about the choices they make along the way to pursue their happiness, and what winning actually means to them. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I do. Thanks for listening. On today's podcast, I have the pleasure of learning some of life's lessons from a very wise man, Kevin Fahey, CEO and founder of peer-to-peer coaching company, Essence of Leadership. Kevin came from a family farm. He went into the Irish clothing manufacturing industry, and after a boardroom battle, he found himself at home, unemployed. Never a man to stand still, Kevin started off a successful training company and was once labelled a positive psychopath by one of his clients. Like so many other businesses, the recession that followed the Celtic Tiger crash had him once again wondering where the next few bob was going to come from. Kevin reinvented himself, and with all of his collective wisdom and experience, he remodelled his business, following the simple principle that often the wisdom that we are searching for actually sits within us. He explains why and how peer-to-peer coaching is so powerful, in particular for business owners and senior managers. As I've been very recently grappling with a big birthday number, we also chatted about ageism and what he calls moving into wisdom. Let's hear from Kevin. Kevin Fahey, a huge welcome to the Win Happy podcast. How are you doing today?
Great to be here, Greg, and really looking forward to this. It's my first time to do an interview like this, so I'm waiting with bated breath. So,
your first time now, in the name of God, how long are you waiting for the first time to do an interview like this? How many years?
Oh my gosh. What was it? 7.5 at this stage, but what years am I waiting? Well, I suppose, in this business about just over 30 years.
Okay.
In this particular aspect of it, I've really been doing it for the last, I suppose, 10 years.
You're the founder of the Essence of Leadership. This call was originally scheduled for last week, and I was going nuts. My machine was updating, or the broadband was... There was some issue anyway. There was some issue. We were exchanging texts. I was all frustrated. Eventually I picked up the phone and I rang you and I apologised. You had the most beautiful way of taking it all down. What did you say to me?
Well, I said it wasn't to be. Be what had happened.
You have a nice philosophy about life and a lovely way of looking at things. And one of my early questions for you, is that something that was always in you, or was that something that was learned over time?
I was the polar opposite. I came from the other side of trying to control life and control it out of fear, but have learned that to develop wisdom, you've got to know who you're not. You've got to know both sides of the polarity. So I started out on the wrong side of the road.
That's a really good place for me to jump off from, because I want the listeners to know about the essence of leadership, how you work, because you work in a very, very interesting way with business people. But what I'd like them to know and understand is that journey that you went on that brought you to that place, that gave you that wisdom, and the advice that you're going to give people today, and your different thoughts and your approach to different things, that they might understand a little bit where that came from and how it came about. So a very simple question: who the hell are you and where did you come from? And I mean right back to the beginning.
Well, born on a farm in East Galway, country fella growing up in a rural townland in East Galway, and went on, and I suppose as a small part of the class that went on to secondary school, I was lucky, cycled 10 miles into Garbaley College, failed my leaving cert in Irish, and just about passed all the other subjects. I went to work in a warehouse, and then went to work in a jeans factory.
Okay.
Always had an interest in developing myself. So at night I qualified as an industrial engineer. became the most hated guy in the factory doing time and motion study.
So you were that fella that's walking around the place with the clipboard.
Stopwatch, exactly. Stopwatch, yeah. And spent about 2 or 3 years of that and ended up in management. And became one of the main directors, managing directors, and ended up running 2.5 clothing companies. I was jointly doing it with another company in Ireland, all in manufacturing, until the clothing trade disappeared out of Ireland and ended up in a boardroom battle with people who wanted to take over the business. Luckily, I didn't win it. Luckily, they won it because I would have lost my house. So I always had an interest in training and development. So I joined a franchise, an American franchise, which was using a form of pop psychology, goal setting and self-esteem and believing in yourself and all that great stuff, mainly around positive thinking. So I was what a German referred to one time at one of my programs, which pulled the rug from under me. He said his first reaction to a video I played about peace of mind and goal setting and all that was, he says, his comment on the character was, that guy is a positive psychopath. And the whole group laughed. So I ended up for about 10 years selling positive thinking. So this was two sides of me. The underside was suffering greatly from stress and anxiety. And the other side was putting out a lovely polished veneer of being positive. So that led me to study psychology and go on a journey of self-discovery. I did 2 forms of psychology, personal construct and process work. The process work was what most inspired me. It was by an American group who had studied in Zurich. And what I loved about it was that I learned that each of us has a journey and there's no one way to live your life. And that life is really a journey of discovery. And process work was about discovering aspects of yourself that you might have been critical about, but in actual fact needed to be made known. So that was absolutely fantastic. And in between, I left my franchise, selling positive thinking, and set up my own, which was around 2001. So I'm about 22 years on my own. And I went into companies selling, I suppose, a form of consultancy, facilitation. And in between, I was doing, I suppose, training or running some training, but mainly facilitating change. And then my business collapsed, totally disappeared in 2008, as a lot of businesses did. And that really took the wind out of my sails, because I lost 95% of my business. Took quite a while to recover, both emotionally, psychologically, and financially. But it was a great learning lesson, because I had gone from being the managing director, being the guy who organised checks for the local soccer and GA clubs and was the main man about town, to being on the dole and having an experience with St. Vincent de Paul calling to the house one day with €200 that I didn't know. They found out that I was on my knees. So that was really living both sides of the coin, as they say. Came out of that very humble and realised that there was 5% of my business that didn't disappear. And this was the part where I met business owners and some CEOs to shoot the breeze around their challenges and their problems. And I realised maybe this was a different way of helping companies. So I discovered through a lady who was working with me a process based on a system called Theory U, done by a guy called Otto Sharma, Professor Otto Sharma in MIT in Boston. We started to implement that and we called it peer-to-peer leadership coaching. So it evolved from people meeting from 2 hours in the morning to discuss challenges, to going through a fairly structured process where people in the group, the participants, became their own coaches to each other. They learned to ask questions of each other and they learned to give feedback that wasn't advice, to give a sense of what was going on for the other person. This also came from, I did business counselling with Durham University, and I learned a particular phrase there which stood to me, which was, give a man a fish and you feed them for a day and teach them to fish. So that for me was moving from giving advice, giving the fish, to actually teaching people to tap into their own wisdom. And that's literally what I do at the moment. The big part, I suppose, I learned in between was, and that's been an evolving learning, is to really understand that people have their own wisdom, that everybody from a very young age has the capacity to live their own lives, but not alone that when they're in a group. And this comes from a book I've recently read called A Simpler Way, which is that all of us are self-organizing organisms. When you get a group of people together, when I reflected on this, I came up with a memory of in the schoolyard at 11 and 12 years of age in East Galway, a group of boys getting together and putting two hurling teams, whether it was 5-a-side, 6-a-side or 7-a-side, organising who played where, with no teacher, no coach, no manager. Went out in the field and put up 2 goal posts, 2 sticks put out of a ditch, and played a game. And I said, my God, if we're capable of doing that, having come from a farm with no education, very little access to books within ourselves, why do we put people into a company, into a hierarchy, and tell them how to do their jobs? We are discarding so much wisdom. So that's where I'm at. That's how I arrived there from my own experience of being the person who was at the top of the hierarchy in that command and control, to being the person who's now gently, not in a Trumpian way, I suppose, evolved that hierarchy to tap into the wisdom of that fantastic human resource we all talk about.
Your father, was he a full-time farmer?
He was. He was a full-time farmer, yeah. A very unusual man, an incredible man. He worked in a mill in his early life, grinding corn for people to make porridge. And then his dad, my grandfather, bought a farm from him and set him up. What was incredible about him was he built a bungalow without never having stood on a building site. He built it, roofed it, plastered it, plumbed it, electric wired it, all by getting somebody in for an hour or two to get him to start to show him how to do it.
That was his YouTube, was it?
That was the YouTube of the day. The builder who used to come down on his bicycle, and he showed him how to cut the roof and put up the slates. And then somebody came in and showed him how to plumb it.
Was it a fine house? Is it a house you grew up in?
It's now owned by a cousin of mine. The farm was sold out, and a cousin now lives in it. So.
As a farmer and your father, would you have called him an entrepreneur?
Absolutely, absolutely. He was that kind of man. Probably suffered from depression, as a lot of country people did, but got on with life. Do you follow me? He did the best he can. There were 8 of us in the family, and we all went different ways. But yeah, he wasn't an entrepreneur in the sense of setting up other businesses, but he did different things, like he grew cabbage plants and sold them in the market. He sold potatoes in the market. And so he did different things.
And as a young lad growing up in that family, were you aware that some years were better than others, and if the weather was very bad, that there mightn't be the extra present at Christmas time or whatever, that it would affect the income to the family?
Wasn't really aware of it, because as I reflect on it, that no matter what situation you are in as a child or as a youngster growing up, that's the only reality you know. So you don't have anything to compare it with. So you just accepted what was there, whether it was the Catholic Church or your father's philosophy or the teacher's way of doing things. That was the way things were done. And you accepted that that was the correct way.
Because in my case, I remember my own dad had worked with the B&I in Cork, the ferry company, and he was made redundant. You mentioned, clothing and everything else, or clothing manufacturer in Ireland. So a lot of people experience redundancy. And I remember the fear of that, even as a child. Now, I wasn't a child. I was probably 11, 12, that kind of a way. But that fear kind of stuck with me. And I would say that my motivation, a lot of the time, throughout my whole life, work and everything else, you might say if you're self-employed, you mightn't have had that in you. But without a doubt, I would always have said that fear was my driver. Just petrified that you weren't going to work or just work hard, and you never take that for granted. Like, we were having a chat about my son in the film industry and all that kind of business, and my God almighty, I'd be petrified waiting from month after month for the phone to ring and waiting for a gig to arrive, and wow, I'm not sure if I could handle that, in all honesty. But no, you get used to everything, I suppose. So what were the conversations around the kitchen table?
We were in a very Catholic, very, very strong. My mother was so much into religion that when we went to knock to the shrine or went to Crime Patrick or even going to Mass, the rosary was said. So a very strong religious thing, raised in the old Catholic fear of hell, fear of damnation. And so those fears were there. But there were good times as well, because we enjoyed being out on the farm and being given jobs. While my mother was like that from a religious point of view, she was very forward thinking in other ways, in that I had 5 sisters and 2 brothers, but I was close to one brother who was only a year and a half younger than me. And my mother got us to every second evening to do the washing after the dinner and dry the delf and put them away. So we were continuously, as well as working on the farm, we were given jobs around the house. So there was no preference. There was no, that's a girl's job and that's a boy's job. She went out on the farm. So she was very forward thinking, which stuck to me for the rest of my life.
You would have worked all of the time, even as a young fellow.
You worked on the farm all the time and worked in the house all the time. And every Saturday we'd have to wash out the chairs and wash the floor because there was no line on the floor to the concrete floor. And so, yeah, you were given plenty of jobs. So work was part of life.
Now, you were obviously a model student as you were describing it to me. So when, for whatever reason, the teacher had lost your attention when you were in school, where did you go in your head? Where did you want to be?
I don't know if I had that thing. I suppose I always believed much somewhere deep down that there was something in me that wasn't resolved. So I was never happy to settle into a job that was going to be for the rest of my life. I had a dream earlier on, which I'm glad I didn't follow, which was to join the Guards. I was too skinny, so my chest measurements weren't good enough. But it prevented me from growing my hair long in the 60s as a hippie, which I did. In the background, in every job I was in, I always wanted to stretch the boundaries. I always felt there was something that was worth exploring. And I'm still doing that.
Yeah.
I have no intention of ever retiring. I will cut back, but I will have an interest in exploring some aspect of life. I'm very much into the evolution of our humanity, our consciousness, and how that can support us in our peace of mind. So I don't know if I had a dream for a particular job, but I do know I had an underlying current of being a restless soul.
Are you still restless?
Still restless. Restless now, but in a very, very happy way, not in an anxious way. Restless is in knowing who I am. I really am, I suppose, for the first time in my life, very happy in my own skin, with a small element of frustration that I'm able to sit outside and observe without getting too caught up in it.
And when you abandoned that dream or that plan of becoming a guard, was it just about getting by then, or did you have a very definite plan B?
I never had a plan B. Never had a plan B.
Yeah.
I did the best I could at whatever I arrived at. And I was 3 times unemployed. And even when I was employed, I was always happy to take on a new challenge. So I didn't have a goal of becoming something.
And the lad who went from working on the farm all of the time and working on Saturdays to then suddenly working for someone else, was that an easy transition?
It was reasonably easy, yeah, reasonably easy. I didn't find any great problem with working for somebody else, because I think I had this personality where I really wanted to please others. And I kind of wanted to earn respect from helping others and not having conflict. So I got by fairly easily because in many ways I was the one who always put my hand up to do that bit extra. I've changed a bit now in that I'm much less inclined to want to earn esteem from other people.
And you had that role in manufacturing. And when people think in Ireland now that we're actually manufacturing clothing, could you see the clouds coming over the hill? Could you about, that type of manufacturing in Ireland and competition from overseas? Could you see it coming?
No, that was the amazing thing. And even if I did, I didn't want to see it because I just couldn't envisage myself doing something else. I just felt it was possible to improve it. So I literally was in total denial. And I can understand as part of the human condition, we hold on to that bit of a raft we have because we don't want to let go in case we drown. And that helps me understand when business owners and other people don't want to change because what we're doing is comfortable. We know it. We understand it.
That nearly applies to everything, doesn't it? We go to the restaurant we're comfortable in, or the pub, and we order the meal we normally like getting.
Yeah, it's good to understand that that's part of who we are and what we are, do you follow me?
Yeah, and when you go to that place or that restaurant or that hair salon or the barber shop that you haven't gone into before, there's a bit of awkwardness, isn't it, going in the door and you don't know how this works, and getting anyone to change is a big deal.
Yeah, and I had that, and I had a big transition from being in the training mode where I had the workbook and I had the videos and I had all the exercises laid out and I followed those, to walking into a room with people having absolutely nothing, only an agenda that we're going to create the agenda, we're going to create the work for the day. And that was a huge change for me because that was literally stepping off the life raft, stepping into the water and hoping that you'd find a way to float, So.
And tell me about the most hated man on the work floor, the industrial engineer with the clipboard. But was that a difficult job for you to do?
I didn't find it. You see, at the time, it didn't bother me a huge amount because I suppose I had an easygoing personality and we had the crack with people and I listened to them and I understood where they were coming from. And I was never in a dogmatic frame of mind. So if people had issues or problems, I went and I listened to them, and I tried to understand where they were coming from. So no, it wasn't, but it was a good education because it gave me a scientific approach to solving problems. It helped me see that there was logic behind why things were done.
And I presume at the core of all that is, improving processes and making things more efficient. And I'm sure there was a lot of manual labor at that stage. Were the workers on board? Were they looking for some of these changes? I'm sure a few conversations with a few of the guys or the women on the floor, very, very quickly, they would tell you what improvements could be made.
That was another thing that I think was very much part of industry, and especially, this was back in the 80s, the 70s and 80s. So people were much more in a compliant mode. They were glad to have a job. Mainly they were young females out of school, 16. The average age was probably 23, 24, 25, until they had a few kids reared and they came back to work. But they were glad to get a job. The jobs in the factory were probably paid about 50% more than they would have got in the local retail, in a lot of the jobs, unless they had an education went into an office. So they were relatively well paid. I use the word relatively, compared to their workmates. And there was a great atmosphere in the factory. We had a very good, we went into this thing called Tops of the Town. We had our own musical thing and different things. So there was different going on. So there was a great atmosphere and people liked coming to work in it. And there was a fabulous culture in the place.
And becoming a manager, at the point where you were going to buy out the company or get involved in that way. How did that progression happen?
Well, that progression happened because the parent company in the UK collapsed because clothing was becoming extremely uncompetitive. They were coming in from Eastern Europe. China hadn't even started, or North Africa or Morocco. It was really from Eastern Europe, some from Hong Kong. So the parent company in the UK collapsed, and we were the only profitable company. So we were the ones that the banks decided to sell off. So we were still making a profit in Athlone at the time. So when we realized, the three directors, I was one of three directors in the company, we realized, my God, maybe this is our chance. So we went up in opposition to those who were trying to buy it out from outside, who were two guys from Northern Ireland. So that's what became kind of an ambition that we could make this work ourselves. We didn't see the big picture. We didn't see that clothing was going to be gone. We thought we could move the chairs around on the deck, and the ship would still survive. But the Titanic was about to sink.
So that was a lucky day when the Northern Ireland boys beat you to the punch.
It was partly, but it was a very tough year after they took over. It was probably one of the most toxic year and a halves of my life. We were in continuous battle. It was an underlying current of...
so you were still there as...
I was still there. And then one day they arrived down because we couldn't get on again, gave me 5 minutes to clear my desk and get out, So.
What was that day like?
That was horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. Arrived home to my wife saying, I have good news and bad news. I'm allowed to keep the company car, but I have no job.
Were you set free?
No. I was in turmoil. I was set free at one level and in absolute turmoil because, how was I going to pay the mortgage, feed her and educate our daughters? And that was tough.
What year was it?
That was 1991.
Okay.
23 years ago.
And how old were the family at that stage?
My daughters were 12 and 9.
And you were a senior manager in that company. I'm sure there was a bit of, reputation in the area,
It was. The most amazing thing was that the shop steward for the area, we had over nearly 200 employees, shop steward from the area rang me because the employees wanted to go on strike because their boss was fired. So obviously that was really incredible. He said that I had that much loyalty, that there was tears all over the place.
And knowing you, Kevin, as little as I do, I'm not surprised at all. So from the darkness of that day to you having a genuine feeling that I'm rocking again, I'm moving again, I'm going in a positive thing, how long did that take?
Well, it's been a journey. There's been good times and tough times in between. As I said, the recession in 2008 was a big change. Leaving my franchise Century Management in 2000 was a change. It wasn't that big a change. And going totally out on my own was a change. 2008 was a horrendous one, especially around 2011-12 when the work totally died up. That was back to being a horrendous place again. But when I look back on everything and I realize that you only become the person you become when you appreciate the journey you've been on. And I now call it about seeing the oasis in the rearview mirror and seeing that it's an evolution, that I have a strong spiritual belief that I was reincarnated and that continuously reincarnated and that I'm here for a purpose and I choose that purpose and I already know what that purpose is.
So those dark places and those dark times, you visited that scene, that scenario a number of times. How do you get out of them? How did you get out of them?
I think you just get up every day and you just fight the demons. Like I remember lying in bed one morning and just imagining myself slipping under the surface of the water in the River Shannon and saying, oh my God, so that's an easy way out. I mean, once I go down there, within a half a minute, sure, I've crossed over. That's all my troubles over. But just to have that thought and then come back and realize, no, I'm not that bad. I've got a house. I got a family, do you follow me? I've still got some work. So I think beneath the surface, there's a resilience. And I read something recently in a book where when the ego gives up, when all the emotions give up, there's a soul beneath the surface. And it's like a wild animal that knows how to survive. But that wild animal, if you go trampling near it, it disappears and hides. Now, there is a very small percentage who decide, God, I can't handle this, and I feel for them when they do that. And I studied psychotherapy, and I spent 4 months counselling a farmer who owed double what the farm was worth, and his way out was to go into the tank of water. And I didn't have a clue how to help him. But my supervisor in the States said, Kevin, he trusts you. Just continue to chat with him. So I think we all have, well, not we all, it's not true that everybody, but I think a lot of people have moments of the dark night of the soul. And I think that's when the soul gets us through. It doesn't get everybody through.
You were saying to me when we were chatting that the Kevin at that time is an awful lot different to the Kevin now. Your approach to life, your approach to work, to different situations, your problem solving. Who were you then and who did you become?
I was driven by fear for a lot of my life. Fear that I wouldn't live up to something. Fear that I wouldn't be able to pay the mortgage. Fear that I wouldn't succeed, as in achieve things or achieve certain goals or certain aspirations. I firmly believe now that we all have spirit guides. We all have somebody who's guiding us. It doesn't matter what we call it, whether it's an energy or source of something. And I realize now when I look back that whatever it was came to my assistance along the way. And as a result of that brought me great teachers. So that has helped me, I suppose, relax and trust the process of life.
Is that a case really of just having faith?
I think it's gaining faith. You know, it's gaining faith as you go on. And I don't know whether you call it luck or not, but certainly I'm privileged that I've met those teachers, whether they're on this side of the veil or the other side. I've met those teachers who've helped me evolve to a state where I had no fear of death. Absolutely no fear whatsoever of dying. In actual fact, I look forward to joining whoever's on the other side.
You want to go to a new nightclub?
Yes, exactly. What's going to be the fun? What's the crack going to be? I have that kind of belief now that there's nothing left to fear except fear itself.
You know, you're talking about faith, and at times when things happen, you can think, okay, I just need to have a bit of faith, trust that things will work out. Just keep on doing your thing, keep on pushing, and something happened. You talk about your spirit guide.
Yeah,
will come along and open a door for you that you weren't expecting, or introduce you to someone you weren't expecting. You get a call out of the blue that you weren't expecting, and before you know it, you're up and running again. You'd wish at those times when you're deep in the pit of your stomach with that worry that you would have known that path was going to open up for you. Even like the COVID thing. God, I remember being petrified at the very beginning of all of that. And we all were. And if someone could have told you, this will be all right. Yeah, it'll be all right. Don't worry about it. You'll just slow down for a few months and bit by bit, it'll all resolve itself. And if you could have known at that time, geez, we all might have enjoyed it a little bit more. I'm not sure. It wasn't so bad in truth. Not for us, anyway, not for us. The American influence, you know, the positive psychopath, and being exposed to all things America. We mightn't be too happy about America at the moment. Taking on board their business models and their courses and all that kind of thing. I presume you had to convert an awful lot of that for the Irish audience that you were working with.
Yeah, the Irish audience would find it hard to accept that. I think we have a much more realistic outlook on life. But I think at the same time now we've become more positive in a more natural way. We're less likely to have our self-esteem boosted by the neighbours' disasters. So I think we have changed, definitely. I think there's a massive change. Like I grew up in the 1950s and 60s, in Ireland, and went from no running water to bringing water from the well to no electricity. And to see that massive change in the material side, but also to see it in the emotional side, the maturity, and I see everything that even that false positivity is part of learning, because you learn what doesn't work. So you learn that giving people platitudes doesn't help them, or even telling somebody it's all right is not going to help them, because that's not in their mindset at the moment. Or telling them that this is going to work out, or those dark nights of the soul the sun will come up in the morning. They're not in a place to hear that. They just want to know, will you listen to them? Will you empathize with them? Will you be there for them? And that it's okay for them to feel the way they feel. I think that's the best reassurance, rather than reassure them it's going to get better. I think to reassure them, if they're in the SH, that, yeah, they're in it. And you know what it's like.
Yeah, and there's no point pretending they're not, because they know better than anyone what the SH looks like. Yeah,
exactly. It's the picture in their head, and it's the emotion they feel, and that's where they're at. And that was a big thing for me to learn, to move from trying to help them get out, give them a helping hand, to be with them in the moment.
You spoke about the 5% of that business that was left in 2008. How did that heartbeat keep going? Were they just the luck of the draw, the ones who weren't?
Well, there was an element of desperation that I had nothing else to, so it was the only bit of wood that was passing as I was drowning. So I grabbed it. But then there was a bit of excitement that maybe there's something in there. And that now has become 100% of my business, and is continuously expanding, And I wouldn't have spotted that unless I'd lost everything else. Or I might have spotted years later.
So what evolved from that little nugget, that 5% of what you're doing today, was that an awful lot more enjoyable than what you were doing then with the 100%?
Oh, this is fun. When I go in with a group now, the humour that comes out of it, when you create that atmosphere where people can be themselves and let their guard down and their mask and just be themselves. Like, people will bring situations into work, into the forums, that have nothing to do with work. Might be my 9-year-old son is just so negative, or is just so something, or my sister has just broken, or her husband has just walked out on her, and I'd love to kill the bastard, So when people bring that kind of stuff up, they're being themselves.
Can you talk to me about that group of people and who they are? Because as a business owner, it can be a lonely old place at times. A lot of people think, oh, Jesus, self-employed, they're having the life of Riley and all that kind of thing. The relationships you have with your team, while it might be good at times, you're kind of always the boss and all that kind of thing. So that group, they come in the door to you. It sounds like an AA meeting, except they're not talking about giving up the drink, the demon drink, that they're doing something else. Can you describe those people to me and the similarities and maybe even the differences between them as well?
Well, generally, I suppose on reflection that you asked the question, I reckon the business owners and maybe even senior managers are probably much more insecure than most employees, especially, they would be much more insecure in many ways, because they have a burden of looking after people, looking after the business, and making the right decisions. And they take so much responsibility on themselves. And they're at the cold face of consequences for decisions. So they're really in the eye of the storm. And the other thing is that to realize that they're ordinary human beings. And the big thing they get from sitting in with groups is, one person said, because we chat about insights, what insights did you get out of the day? Do you follow me? What new views do you have about life or about yourself? And one of the comments I've heard a few times from people is, well, I'm not as fucked up as I thought I was. The other 6 or 7 in the room are equally, if not more, basket cases than I am. So when they get to realize that their innermost thoughts and feelings are, because we all project a mask, whether it's a professional mask or a business mask or whatever it is, or a family mask, we all can't bring this mask with it. So when we see the masks taken off, we realize, oh my gosh, I'm okay. And it's like that thing again, it's okay to be not okay. And by realizing that it's okay to be not okay, I'm actually okay. It's again the paradox. So the people come in, it's amazing how quickly they adapt. Like people will say to me, Kevin, I don't like talking in front of groups. Can I just sit quietly for 2 hours? And it's the first person I have to shut up after about 20 minutes.
I think it's a unique group with a unique set of challenges and things that they need to do. I always think myself a lot of the time, we're not bulletproof. The things that go on in a workday with your team or different circumstances or clients, sometimes it's like the ship that takes a right rollicking, out at sea in a storm, and it comes in, but it needs a good kind of repair, but you're still just in there in the harbour a little bit battered. So you're not bulletproof. You're not bulletproof. And one of my team, we had to trek to Dublin to do a workshop with a client. And it was funny. It was a mixed group. I didn't know any of them really beforehand. And you never know in these situations what the dynamics are with the different people. And, you have a job to do, but you're trying to figure out the agendas and everything. And it went well. It went well. And we were coming back after, and my colleague, it's actually Suzanne, she turned around. It was actually nearly upsetting. She said, well done, Greg. You did really well today. I thought you managed that situation. And no one says well done to the boss.
No. People in general, but I think it's more even so business owners, and I would include business leaders in the sense of managing directors or senior managers, that they're own worst critics. I remember one time working with this. Well, I had one of my longest and best clients. He retired a few years ago. He asked me to get personal help. He said, right, Kevin, you're great at coaching me in the business and even as a leader. Is there somebody else? So I was quite upset when he came back and said to me, God, I learned something really fantastic from this lady. And I said, what did you learn? He said, I went to her with this problem that I could never finish my to-do list. And I have been going for 20 years and I can never get the last one or two things done. And she said to me, John, when do you ever review your to-done list?
Yeah.
And I went, oh my God, she's right. That we're always looking at the half-empty part of the glass. We're rarely looking at the part that's full or the part we've achieved. So I do think that we do. But I also think that's a positive thing, because it means that we get up every day to strive to be better.
Yeah, if there's a day when you have nothing on your to-do list, for me, that's a day when you've stopped thinking, you've stopped figuring out, there isn't another thing to do. So I think we're always looking, moving, changing, exploring opportunities.
Another recent one, Greg, I'm now working on, that you've made in life when you're happy doing nothing.
Yeah. That could be a recipe for when happy, Kevin.
Very good. Very good. When happy, doing nothing.
In terms of people getting in touch with you and how they can work with you, who does business with you and how can they contact you?
Well, I have groups for all kinds of setups. I have a group for next generation, young people taking over the family business. Then I have a group who've already started to take over the family business. They've graduated from that. I have people who've been in business 30, 40 years and just want to improve it. And people who are in business 40 or 50 years and want to get out. I now have a parents group. Their average age is about 67 or 68. They've gone past the retiring age. One or two of them are in their early 70s. They want to learn how to, I suppose, help the next generation develop a business or decide whether to sell it or not. In between, I have a group for professional managers. And I've recently set up a group of HR people. So how do people contact me? Well, my email address is kevin@EOL, stands for essenceofleadership.ie. I'm on LinkedIn. And a good lot of the work I get is through referrals. or people go into Google and the Google accountability or the Google culture change or the Google something, and my name comes up for a lot of them. So I get a good lot of work through people Googling.
And is the work in person? Are all these groups in person, or do you do anything online, or how does all that work?
No, it's all in person at the moment.
It's all in person.
Some work online, a small bit of coaching online, but generally it ends up in person. So people meet for a day, 6 days in the year, a day every 2 months.
Okay. And where do the meetings happen?
And the meetings happen, there's 2 in Dublin, there's 2 or 3 in Mullingar, 1 in Galway, 2 in Athlone, and 1 in Tullamore. So they meet in different places around the country.
Okay. Almost nationwide.
Almost nationwide, yeah. We now have 10 groups meeting. So.
And as well as that, if anyone wants to get nuggets of wisdom on a regular basis from Kevin Fahey, you had another new venture recently, which was your podcast.
Yeah, I've been doing podcasts and they're uploaded on LinkedIn and Spotify, that's it, yeah. And I also do blogs. I send out blogs to I have about an average of about 500 to 600 readers. I send them out to that I've got them off databases, their emails. I send them out to about 1,1700, but on average about 500 will open them at any one time. And I also put them on my website. I haven't done any because I've been too busy for the last 2 months. So I have 3 in the oven at the moment, or 4, and they'll be published over the next 2 months. So.
Yeah, what's lovely about the podcasts is there's little nuggets of wisdom. You do something that's really, really difficult, which is a monologue, and you talk the listener through a particular problem or a particular piece of wisdom or something that you've got from your groups and everything, and with lovely approaches to different things. They're really, really good. My birthday is very, very soon. I'll be 60, and I know you're past that number. All of those numbers come with a psychological thing. I know when I was 50, it kind of bothered me. It did. I was quite conscious of it. I'm saying it out loud now that I'm 60. In my own head, I don't want clients to know that I'm that age. Other business colleagues, whatever. I hate now people say, oh my God almighty, you're nearly 60. But you don't look at it all. And for me, that comment is like, that's actually very old, but you don't look at that number.
Yeah.
It's wrecking my head a little bit. And I know another buddy of mine, he was 65, I think he's gone well past it now, but he was 65 a few years back. He was traumatized because that was the number where you're finished from a career point of view. In everyone's heads, we all know 65 equals retirement. What can you tell me about 60 and 65 or 70 or 75 and being relevant and how people perceive you and maybe even marketing yourself? I'm not sure.
Well, I think it's great that ageism is now being discussed. And it was Carl Jung who said, and he's the father of all psychology, he said, we spend the first 50 years doing it. As in getting married, the kids rearing the kids, getting the mortgage, the house, the job, everything. And then we move into wisdom. Because our natural life cycle is, believe it or not, 120 years. And it's only through shortening it that we end up less, and we're moving into that. And I think it's that sense of moving into wisdom and being comfortable with that. And I think it's all about having a purpose. There's a great book called Ikigai, written by a Japanese guy and a Spanish guy. And it's a study of centenarians. And there's a lot of them in an island in Japan. And one of the features, 2 things I learned from it, they have the usual things of good health and all of that, development that helps people get to there. But one of the things that stood out for me was not to multitask, to just do one thing at a time. And that was about being present to whatever you're doing. And the other thing was always have a purpose, even if the purpose is gardening after retiring. So I've now set up a group for people who've sold their businesses or have retired as a managing director. And the big thing for them is the scary part of the phone stopping ringing. And the idea that the juice and the feedback and the buzz they got from going into work not having it anymore, and that adjustment. And that's why I said earlier on, for me, the next goal is to be happy doing nothing. And it's that sense. And I don't think there's a recipe for anybody. I think each person has to experience it. But I think when this idea that what's for you won't pass you by covers you from when you're open to being open to that and being open to the scary part of it, you allow the wisdom in. Because another expression I heard is we don't have a problem when we know we have a problem, because now we're aware of it. So I think once we're aware of coming to 65 and the challenges and all that, and being open to what's life going to bring you. I don't have an answer, because I do have plenty of dark nights of the soul. Now they're minuscule now compared to what they were. But like life brings its own challenges every day.
And it's funny now that we're having this conversation, you're the second person, it's 75 you are, isn't it?
75, yeah.
Yeah, so you're the second 75-year-old I've had on the podcast this year. Right. And the thing you both have in common is you're all guns blazing with work and ideas and new projects and all that kind of, and I love that.
And I booked you for my 95th.
Absolutely. We've a lot to do between now and then, Kevin.
We have 20 years of work to do. So.
Yeah. What's happiness to you?
Happiness is now. It's being present to what I'm doing. And happiness is achieving something that I felt I couldn't do. Even if it's something small on the computer, something technical. Even if it's something with the car. Doing something that I wouldn't normally do, which I thought was beyond me.
Like recording audio.
Exactly. Even learning to do a podcast. I had this idea of a podcast for 2 years before I eventually did it.
Well done. And if I put the word winning alongside happiness, because the analogy I always use, you were talking about hurling earlier, we might love playing hurling, but if you didn't have goalposts, it might feel a bit pointless after a while.
Yeah.
So do you have goalposts? Do you have things in your head?
I love landing a new client.
Hey.
Or even somebody who was around for a while and moved on and getting them back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It's for me, like from being an engineer and being in production, making the sale, there's nothing to beat it.
Ball in the back of the net, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I have one last huge question for you. And what was the best life choice you've made? Because for me, win happy is choices you make along the way to, well, hopefully with wisdom, you discover that path which gives you pleasure and happiness. You make the choices to make that happen. So your best choice you made along the way?
Getting married.
Okay. Did she sort you out?
Oh yeah, still trying to do it. I'm still a work in progress.
Why was that your best choice?
Because I think you learn more in a close relationship, and you learn as much from the conflicts and the part that doesn't work, because it's in those close relationships you really discover who you are and who you're not. I think all the other ones are at a distance. They're up close, intimate, they're challenging. And if they're not, you're doing something wrong. If there isn't a good fight now and again, you're doing something wrong. Now,
I covered a lot with you. Is there anything I haven't covered? And is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners with?
No, I'm happy with whatever was said. It goes with whatever needed to come out, come out.
Because last week, that nugget of wisdom, when our call messed up and you ended up having an unexpected half an hour free, or an hour as the case may have been, what you said to me was, yeah, I did something else with that time.
Yeah, it's that thing of really going back to what I said, trusting the process of life.
Yeah.
It is working out exactly the way it should. Even with the biggest disasters, they're the ones that are here to help you grow.
So if it goes wrong, or the meeting gets cancelled, or someone throws you a curveball, just catch it and do something with it.
Absolutely. That's the way. But that took a lifetime of not doing it, to follow me, to learn how to do it.
If only someone could have told you that in the first place.
they would have ruined all the fun.
Kevin, thank you so much for coming on the Win Happy podcast. Good man yourself.
Thanks for giving me the time.
Yeah, thank you.
You too. Cheers. Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Win Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.